This is Corrections Unlocked.
What's up, guys? I'm Alex Duran. Thanks for tuning in to Corrections Unlocked. On today's episode, we're going to go over mental health awareness. I believe this is a big topic for law enforcement in general, but I believe this is a bigger topic for correctional officers because we don't have a whole lot of resources as a prison guard. So I wanted to talk about mental health awareness and why this is such an important topic for me. I believe a lot of correctional officers struggle with mental health issues. And I think what it really comes down to, and this is my opinion, is we're very shut off and we're not comfortable to talk about our feelings, about our emotions. You know, as a law enforcement officer, as a prison guard, that's just something that's kind of frowned upon. You look weak. You've all heard the old saying, closed mouths don't get fed. That's kind of all we're immune to. We don't talk about stuff. We're not really supposed to talk about things that bother us. And I feel like that's a big issue with the law enforcement community in general. I believe a lot of officers struggle with trauma. We deal with a lot of incidents that are very traumatic. We see inmates getting stabbed and hang themselves. We see validated gangsters get killed by their own people. We see inmates rot away. And at the beginning, that's not such a big deal. It's one of those things to where you see something, you process it, and you kind of let it go. But it doesn't ever really go away. It just kind of stacks up inside your head. And this is what I call it. I kind of just put it as a file cabinet, right? We have a file cabinet and we stack all these traumatic events in our head. We stack them and we stack them. The first couple of years, it's not that big of a deal because we have a lot of room. Well, over the years and over time, with life, with work, that file cabinet gets filled pretty damn fast. And then it gets overfilled. And in my opinion, that's when officers start doing horrible things to themselves or to others. We can only deal with so much until we can't deal with it anymore. And we can only deal with so much until we lash out and do something wrong. So dealing with these type of incidents as a correctional officer, like I said, if this is something that's new to you and this is your new career, this is something you need to be cautious of. It's not okay to see an inmate hang himself, to tear him down, and to try to do CPR for 5 minutes and pretty much look at a body that's rigor mortis. That's very traumatic. And for you just to process it, clean your hands, write your report, and then an hour later resume program. I get it. That's the process, and that's what you're trained to do. But you need to look out for yourself and process what you actually just experienced, because that's not okay. And the biggest mistake is what I'll call it is we go home and we become this shut off person. We don't express ourselves to our partners, to our family members. Hey, what's going on? Nothing. I'm good. Hey, did anything happen at work? Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. You don't understand. That's what we do. That's what we say. That's what we're programmed to say. We don't like to be vulnerable. And the more we do that, the more distance we end up creating with our family, with our partners. And we become very ugly, in my opinion. So we need to be able to talk about these things, right? We need to be able to express what we're dealing with in these traumatic events. So that way we can understand, like, hey, that was traumatic. Hey, how can I get through this? Instead of filling up this whole file cabinet with all these traumatic events and then letting it circle and circle in our head over and over again and acting like everything's okay when it's not. And then 10, 15 years later, we're shut off. We're not talking to our partners. We're yelling around our kids and being disgruntled. We have no friends. We're antisocial. We're all these negative things. And then we're usually alone. We're usually divorced, alone, and depressed, and don't want to communicate with anybody. And that's the last thing I want for anybody that's joining the department. I don't want you to be that way. I don't want to be that way. It took me about 10 years to realize I was struggling with traumatic events, trying to balance out relationships and my relationship with my kids, and I hate that it took me that long to do it, but I'm happy that I was able to actually buckle down and say, hey, I'm not okay. Hey, I have work to do. And the problem is you are the only person that can actually say that. You are the only person that's actually going to change how you really are. It wasn't until one day somebody looked me in the eye and said, hey, Alex, what can I do to actually help you out? You can't let all this build up in your head and act like you're okay when you're not. And I took that, and that's when I opened up my eyes and I said, hey, I got a lot of work to do. I've ruined relationships. I've distanced myself with my kids. I was considering work home and home nothing. And that's a bad thing. That's a very bad thing. Home is home. Home is where you're supposed to be. Home is where you're wanted. So I had to take a good hard look at myself and said, how can I change this? And it doesn't help, and this is just statistics off what I've seen. I could be wrong, but we process anywhere from 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And they said 80% of those thoughts are completely negative. What I would like to know is what's the percentage for a correctional officer that goes into a negative environment, that is surrounded by a bunch of negative people. I don't think anybody literally joins the department wanting to necessarily be a prison guard. The majority of us wanted to be some type of law enforcement officer, a police officer. We wanted to wear a uniform. We wanted to serve our community. We wanted to drive around in a police car. I didn't want to drive around in a shot-out golf cart. I didn't want to sit around and look at inmates for 8 to 16 hours a day, having them stare me down. It's exhausting. It sucks. But that's part of the process of being a prison guard. And whatever it is I'm doing in life, I like to be the best at doing it. So I try to push myself to be the best I can be in my line of work. And I believe corrections in general is there's no respect for correctional officers in the law enforcement community. I've never seen anybody say, hey, thank you for your service. I've seen them thank police officers for their service. I've seen them thank firefighters for their service. Nobody's ever walked up to a prison guard and said, hey, man, thank you for keeping those inmates away. I've heard, oh, you're overpaid. Oh, you're a babysitter. Oh, you're disgruntled, all the negative stuff. And I get it. That's just how people talk. But if you think about it, that builds up in our heads and it becomes a very negative thing. Going back to what I said, we already think so many negative thoughts a day. We don't need to hear anything more negative. So I told myself, every morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to tell myself 2 positive things. 2 positive things. 1 positive thing about the day, 1 positive thing about myself. As dumb as that sounded, I did that for 30 days. 30 days straight. Because in my opinion, if you do anything for a week, if you do anything for 2 or 3 days, it doesn't matter. But if you push yourself to do it for 30 days, it becomes routine. It becomes more of a program. And that's the only way I can get stuff to really stick in my head. But ultimately, guys and girls, it starts with you accepting yourself, realizing you got work to do, and you need to make a change for yourself, for your family, and for your partners. A lot of us get disgruntled. A lot of us hate what we do. And then we lash out. We look for the quick, easy route of satisfaction, which usually ends up me being an alcoholic, me cheating and messing around, like most men do. What does that solve, especially in our line of work? And this is my opinion again. Whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're in a relationship or you're married, you really need to try hard to communicate with your partner and let them understand your line of work, what you're going into, and how to be able to be open about that. Your partner needs to be your rock. You guys need to be able to talk about stuff, work stuff out, and grow from it. as a couple, as a whole, especially in this line of work. You need a partner. And I realized at the time, not having a partner, I needed to do this on my own. I needed to push myself and speak these positive words to myself. So if you have a partner or you know somebody in law enforcement, give them some positive words. Give them some positive feedback. Hey, man, you're doing really good for yourself. You know, what you do going into work, that's a hard thing to do. I'm proud of you. Thank you for your service. Nobody's ever done that. Do it for somebody. You'd be surprised at how much of a difference you can make for that person. And if you're somebody that's struggling with finding yourself, there's so many different ways to fucking figure that out. There's so many things you can do, start doing, but it all starts with you accepting who you are, realizing you have work to do, and making those improvements with yourself. Me, I push myself every day to go to the gym, even when I hate it, even when I don't want to work out. And I really just destroy my body in the gym as bad as I can. And that's kind of how I deal with depression and anxiety. But in return, I feel better. I feel more energized. And that's one of my outlets is working out. And I have plenty of outlets. And this is something that I've continued to grow so I can find new things to do, things that I like, things that I don't like. But I needed to be the best version of myself for my kids, for my family, for my partner. And every law enforcement officer does not want to be vulnerable. But I'm telling you, you need to be vulnerable. You need to be open with talking about what you just experienced. And there's going to be those tragic events where you're going to do a cell extraction that's going to go really bad, or you're going to have to drag out a body or see a bunch of inmates stabbed up, screaming, whatever it is you have going on, that's going to be processed through your head. And if you've already experienced that, I'm sure you're thinking of it now because it just doesn't go away. But these are the kind of things you need to be able to talk to your partner about. She needs to know, he needs to know what's going on in that head. So that way you can work it out together. So I really push that. I push speaking to your partner, speaking to your family, being vulnerable, accepting yourself, and talking about what you do and what you're experiencing. And being positive about yourself and realizing home is home. You need to be the best version of yourself for your kids and for your partner. You can walk into any or look at any relationship, and I guarantee you every lady's going to say, hey, and they'll tell you everything they went through that day. You won't believe this freaking B cut me off, and so, I can't believe she fucking bought that stupid purse. They'll tell you everything. But as a man, we don't express anything. That's a bad thing, especially when we have some serious stuff going on. I remember before I joined the department, my brother was already in the department. And within a first year, he's on the yard watching yard, and he sees a Crip walk up to another black, slice him right on his throat, right in front of him. Blood leaking out everywhere. And he had to process that. It's a whole lot of processing to do when you've never seen anybody get stabbed or really hurt in their life. And then he had to go home and deal with what he processed and what he saw, and didn't even feel comfortable talking to his family about that. Nobody does as a law enforcement officer, as a prison guard. 15 years go by, he can tell you that story like it's the back of his hand, because those are the things that stick with us. And those are the things that our partners need to know we struggle with. So mental health, guys, it's a big topic. We need to be aware of these things as a peace officer, as a prison guard, as a law enforcement in whole. We need to understand that we're very stubborn. We're trained to not talk about these things. We're programmed to not talk about our feelings. We create this stigma that I'm okay when we're not. And we need to accept that we're not okay. We need to accept that we need to be vulnerable and talk about our emotions. And I've always been that guy like, oh, I don't want to talk about work. Work's stupid. Work's stupid. But every one of us is struggling with something. And those are the kind of things we need to be talking about with our best friends, with our partner. Because if you don't, it just sits in your head. And like I mentioned, you can only put so much in your file cabinet before it overflows. And when a file cabinet overflows, that's when we start acting out. And I've seen it. I've seen officers talk about going through divorce and not having enough money for their kids that have cancer, and they're working overtime and they're burnt out. And then the next day, they're 30 minutes late for work, and you're calling trying to figure out where they're at. And then you get a call from the local police agency that they killed themselves and shot themselves in the head. And then you got to process that. And this is the reason why I talk about these things, is because if we were to talk about these things and be vulnerable with our issues, I believe we could help each other out. I believe that's what we need to do. And like I said, I struggle with a lot of these issues, but I fight every day. I wake up every day. I speak positive words every day. I'm very disgruntled, but I don't show it, and I push myself not to be that way. But look yourself in the mirror. Be able to accept where you're at, and be able to look yourself and say, hey, I got fucking work to do, and go do it. That's all I got, guys, on mental health awareness. It's a sensitive topic for me, but it's something I wanted to talk about because I feel we struggle with this. If this is something you're struggling with, I appreciate it if you could share a comment. Or if this is something that you think you can benefit from, I'd appreciate it if you dropped a like. Thank you, guys. I'm Alex Duran.